Okay, well, we can march through it. I'm Tim Simonds. I'm an artist that's worked with Wen-You and also with Lu.
Hello everyone, I'm Lu. We both worked together. I worked with Tim and worked with Wen-You. And then here is Wen-You.
So we're going to talk through two books that are being released tonight at Print and Matter. One, I have the old edition, but When You Make No Art, which you'll see on the table over there. Mm-hmm. And the second, which is newer in a way, but older in other ways, Rooster, Tiger, Sheep by Snake, which is a book of photos in concert with an exhibition that opened, when did it open?
It opened in October in Macau, and it's still on view.
So we'll talk a bit about these two books, but then we're hoping that we actually end up more talking about the collaborations that we've done together, and and also the space special that Wen-You runs, and I hope. I hope that we can get to a point where we can bring some context to what this curatorial project is of special that Wen-You runs with many people that are actually here. Sorry, my voice is going in and out with many different mediums. So I hope that we're going to both try to set up a context both for these books and also for special. So I hope that we can take it from there. Mm-hmm. So you're going to start by talking maybe a bit about this book, in the context of
mm-hmm. Thank you, Tim and Lu, for your wonderful introduction and for joining me today in talking about my projects, and it's also our shared collaborations. Collaboration is a very big part of my practice, so this is going to carry on through the discussion that we have this evening. Also, we decided to mash the two titles together of the two books. That was decided about half an hour ago in our conversation, you will understand why as we continue to discuss this. So first, we will go through the photo book, Rooster, Tiger, Sheep by Snake. This is a recent release of photographs collected over 12 years that I've taken of my family, of 3 members of my family. Rooster is my father, Tiger is my mom, and Sheep is my sister, and Snake is myself. And there's 175 photographs in this collection, taken from 2006 to 2018. And this is so I'll show you some photographs from this. These photographs are currently being exhibited at MGM Cotai in Macau. It's a hotel casino that has an arts and culture program, and they have invited me to do a photography exhibition there on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Macau handover back to mainland China. And so this is Tiger, this is Sheep. And what drew me to this exhibition, to this concept, was that I've always been drawn to photography from a young age, but however, I wasn't able to find myself to be comfortable in front of the camera for a long time. And over the years, as I'd taken a lot of photographs of my family, I kept seeing them as great, very photogenic. So this series is my investigation of my photogenic family and trying to understand what that means from behind the lens. And as a family, we traveled around the world together, and I like to catch very candid moments. And so underneath, there's little captions, little stories of the photographs and vignettes. This was on Chinese New Year in 2014, and now this is the 6th anniversary of this date. And so throughout the photographs, there's like moments that are a bit more performative and moments that are more candid, like this one, which is a family funeral in my parents' hometown. And there are many, and there's like, I like to capture the environment in which things occur as we dress in funerary costumes for my great-grandmother's funeral. There are also local children that are going to the swimming pool in similar outfits, similar colors. And these are more performative elements of my family, but it's not so much that they wanted me to capture them in these moments. It was just very naturally, I'm just capturing their natural state of the play between our family. And through the photographs, you see my younger sister, who is 13 years younger than me, grow up in front of the camera. My father and mother looks relatively the same, but my sister becomes a timestamp. So the book is in chronological order. And there's also elements in where you see the artistic elements of my father, who's an artist, and my sister, who's also cultivating her artistic side, and how that plays out in the dynamic of our family. And our family is also an artistic family. And through the whole collection, I'm not shown in any of the photographs except with the exception of this one, where you can see me in the flash. And then there's another photograph in the collection where you see a leg or an appendage. And I wanted to make myself not present in the photographs, but in all of the photographs there's the element of the composition and the way that my participation in sort of the interaction between our family is all present. And so this is the exhibition in Macau. And I wanted to display it in a salon-style manner with the blue walls. And I also, because it's not a traditional gallery space, as I'd mentioned earlier, it was at a casino hotel, they gave me a space that that used to be a jewelry store. And we converted it into a gallery. And in order to house these works that I believe to be very intimate, I wanted people to come in and experience the kind of the river of memory that in the way that I see them. And they are somewhat chronological, but over time there's also mishmashes of time where it kind of jumps backward and forward a little bit. And this is my family looking at the photographs. And also in many of the photographs, there's remnants of our family visits in artistic environments. This is a photograph in the Uffizi Gallery. And we are all nurtured and cultivated by the art that surrounds us, as well as creating art at the same time. And in the exhibition in Macau, this photograph is in a light box in front of the casino entrance. So I'm kind of instilling the image in this like completely out of context environment. And I was very interested and excited to present art in an environment that was not for people who were there to look at art, and that would be a little for them. I wanted to make art accessible to everybody, and so people who are there to gamble or who are having a vacation or shopping, they can also come and see intimate moments of our family And what was really exciting during this exhibition was that a lot of people came to see the show, and they're usually there on a solo trip or completely unfamily related trips, and they saw their own families within the exhibition, which was something that I was very happy to hear. And now we move to When You Make No Art.
Can we ask?
Yeah. Sure, please chime in.
We're the backup band.
Yeah, no.
I'm gonna speak like this unless somebody can't hear me, or maybe not that loud. But I think we both have a lot of questions for you that maybe come before turning backwards. I mean, this is published in 2019,
yes.
And this was originally published in Chinese
In 2015.
in 2015, and then
I had written it from 2012 to 2014, right after I graduated from college. And it was published in Chinese in 2015. It was translated into Chinese, and the English version was produced in 2016. Okay. And it was originally in a limited edition of 300 copies in yellow. And thanks to Printed Matter, I'd sold out of the yellow copies, so now I've re-editioned them in green.
So before we go 3 years back in time, I think we both have questions. I mean, one kind of very simple question to ask is why you choose to refer to your family members by the zodiac signs. And if there's, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that for you is related, because you mentioned that you didn't want to have yourself in any of the photographs, and you showed that one photograph of the flash that's actually blotting yourself out. I don't know if there's a connection between those, but if not, just kind of how you think about the zodiac names, if that's an important part of it, that it goes through the story of the book.
I wanted this to be relatable to many people. Should I just speak without them? Yeah. So I'll try to speak louder. I thought, coming from a Chinese family, a lot of Chinese people often ask about, upon introduction, or as they're getting to know each other, they ask the question of which animal are you, which is very common in Chinese culture. And so I wanted the book to not be about so much who my family is, the individual characters of my family, but I wanted the photographs to demonstrate a family of 4 people, one of them unseen, and how we interact with one another over the years and capture the dynamic. Another element to the zodiac is also that a lot of people like to instill characteristics to different zodiac signs, kind of like horoscopes. And people would say, oh, you're a rooster, so you must be like this, or a tiger, so you must be like this, or people kind of associate themselves where they are relative to the other person. And I was hoping that by doing this, it would be more accessible to people, and maybe keep people guessing, and maybe even like create a dialogue in which they might have not known this person for who they are previously, but based on the zodiac, which is a very universal trait, that they could try to understand them.
I think I kind of also have a question that relates to the zodiac as well, but then as well as like your own role in your family through this photo book, because the whole story in the book that I found that you wrote kind of like without their names, or without, I don't know if the tiger is mom or the snake is sister, or like who they are, but you kind of wrote your own narratives, with that. Like, how do you see yourself with those relationships? Like, if nobody knows snakes are snakes is father, or sheep is sisters.
Also, throughout the book, there's little stories of each, and I don't use the names, but I used the animals. So in some ways, people can kind of guess based on that. And I think like in the beginning, it's a little bit unclear. And I do have instill a family hierarchy in the beginning through the title by calling the father as the rooster, the mother as tiger, and then my younger sister as sheep. However, as you look through the book, there really isn't any hierarchy. It's just one. Each animal is just one of 12 animals, and we're 4 represented out of the 12 animals in the zodiac. So I think there's like a set of expectations that some people. I'm trying to kind of break free of those expectations that one must have, especially if they see this book and they see my father as an artist that they might recognize. But these photographs are of a completely different aspect of what somebody would have originally have thought of these characters to be.
But by expectations and what people presuppose, you're talking about what the image of what your family would be known for otherwise, or
I wanted to capture I wanted the book to be mainly about a family dynamic and kind of very truthfully show very candid moments in our family that people might not otherwise know, that we're very we play together, we travel a lot together, we're like the sort of the closeness of that, and less so from the perspective of how somebody might perceive a famous artist or how somebody might perceive our lifestyle to be.
I often, like you mentioned it, I often don't see you in the photographs. Only on the cover photo that you have a flash here. That's like how much when you take space in this family dynamic. So I'm just kind of very curious about how you discover yourself through photographs of the family.
I think that's a good question. In both this book, Rooster, Tiger, Sheep by Snake, and also When You Make No Art, it's about trying to figure out where my place is within the family structure. And I think in life, we're always trying to figure out where we are in that. And our family is so much a part of what shapes us in our day-to-day, that as these 2 books kind of stem through a long period of time, Rooster, Tiger, Sheep by Snake for 12 years, and When You Make No Art also stemmed through my upbringing up until I was 24 years old, that it's an investigation of where I am, and in each photograph, some moments there's some moments that are happier and some moments that are sad, and I'm constantly taking in different information from all of these photographs and all of these moments that we experience in different landscapes.
And how do you, why do you choose photography?
I choose photography. I explain in the book that I choose photography because I can't draw. And I like to use something that is very instantaneous. Most of these photos were taken with a point-and-shoot camera, so I also just wanted to do something that was really quick to capture it. And most of them are also filmed too, because I feel like film is a format in which we capture, and then it creates an object, as opposed to digital photography. I often lose track of where the files go, and the colors of the film kind of is like very artistic in quality. That it was from a younger age, I always found myself to gravitate to this as an instant way of making art as a reluctant artist, that I say in my bio.
I think that seems to be like a perfect transition into the book that was published earlier. If I can get back there. It's mentioned at the end of this book. It's also part of the title in a certain way, but it's in your bio even for tonight. that you say Wen-You is a reluctant artist. And yeah, at the very end of this book, you sort of like have this realization where you're like, I'm a reluctant artist, like, and so I'm just curious if you want to expand on that as a way of getting into talking about this a bit.
I think that so When You Make No Art is a book that I wrote with different stories of my upbringing relating to art and also not relating to art, and mostly about my family and my education in art school, and growing up in general, and trying to figure myself out, like trying to learn and understand where I really want to be and finding a sense of purpose. So the last this photograph was taken when I was 5 years old, and I took this photograph. I had an album back in 1995 where I took photographs, and each roll would be printed, and I would pick a photo from each roll. And I was working with an artist who wanted to capture the world from a child's eyes. So she would give me film, and she would process it for me. We pick photos, and I write a caption with each photo. So I have an album from that time, and each one I write a caption. And this wasn't very symbolic to me until I was working on When You Make No Art. And we go back to this, and when I went back to this, I realized that this was a very interesting photograph, because there's my father, who was this was a project that he did, Century of Mushroom Cloud, where he wanted to photograph himself. It's a photo of him igniting a mushroom cloud out of his hand. And in the real image that he used, there's no ladder. It was just there to elevate him in this picture. And I, at 5 years old, took a photo of the whole kind of behind the scene, which broke the illusion of the image. And meanwhile, I noticed later on, which I wasn't really aware of, that I took a selfie at the time at the same spot. And it's interesting because there's the Twin Towers in the background, and it kind of dates the image too, and sort of kind of creates myself in the context of history.
Can you speak to how the context of these images in terms of the book? I mean, they're the very first page of the book, right?
Yeah. I think it's hard I don't really have like one answer to that. I think the context is so that people can enter into reading this book and perhaps understand the context of what the perspective that I'm writing from, which is that at the age of 5, I did create something that was very artistic, and then it sort of was the beginning of my art making in some ways, one could say. And then from there, I kept walking on a path that I kept trying to rear away from art making, but would keep finding myself back at it.
Yeah, I've noticed this slice that the title of the first chapter is "Museums are awful lonely places to grow up." Like, do you have relationship to that part of growing up, in terms of your relationship of art and art making? Why museums so awful?
It's not awful. It's an awfully lonely place.
Awfully lonely. And why so lonely?
Because it added to my sensibilities, for certain. Now today I operate a storefront space, which is a shop gallery called Special, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and it's a shop and a gallery, and I work with a lot of artists. So my upbringing of growing up in museums, I felt like it was a lot of things were not very Well, the context is that I grew up being in museums during its after hours, so a lot of visitors wouldn't be there. It would be closed off, and I would just be alone in these places with no other people, no children to play with. So I was alone for a lot of the times, and that kind of inferred into the sensibility of not being able to leave art, but trying to figure out a way in which I can make it a more engaging environment.
Can you, just for some people that don't know, certainly we've read the book, but and before maybe getting into, I'd like to ask you about how you organized the different stories that are in the book. But why is it that you would have grown up in museums?
Yeah.
I mean, just for people that...
Yeah, give a little context.
So my father, who is here today, his name is Zhang, and he's an artist. He's a contemporary artist who has had exhibitions at the Guggenheim, MoMA, the Met, the Whitney, pretty much all the major museums in New York and also around the world. And throughout my life, he has been working as an artist. So that's the context of my upbringing.
Where were you born in this context?
I was born in Japan.
And then how do you get to New York then? While you're here.
My father was a grantee of the Asia Cultural Council residency program. And so we came when I was 5 years old.
So you had 5 years in Japan growing up, and then kind of all over the world of the museum after hours, and then had a relationship with art in that way. So then I think because I did read the book, and like the first part, the museum are awful lonely places to grow up. When I read, I had this really intimate feeling of, being a little kid and then like just seeing art in this out of nowhere content. Like you have at that time I think you don't have art history to understand what is happening. So it's pure instinct of what the art is doing to you. So then you're having this like your own figuring out way of understanding what art should be in that period of time. So I felt like with that, does that part has a lot of influence on what you do now, and like in some ways?
Can you repeat that?
Does growing up in a museum in after hours, like your relationship with art at the museum, like does that part has a lot of influence on your the way you look at art right now?
Yeah, definitely. I look at art in a way that is not more through a sense of feeling. I feel like to this day my knowledge, even though I studied art history and I studied art making, I feel like everything that is bestowed upon me is not so much from the art historic understanding, but more from a sense of absorbing it through my upbringing.
But there's also something else in that, I mean, in this chapter, but throughout the whole book, there are moments where you're going on an El Greco pilgrimage, right, for example, and it's as if it's sort of the feeling that you never, like, together as a family, you almost never get there, because every scenario you're being sort of turned to something else. And to me, it's both also in how the book is set up, that you have these interlaced stories of you're in Bilbao, but then a page later you're jumping back to being at RISD and trying to figure out what a critique is and things like that. But these almost like non sequiturs to me are very like sort of reminiscent in a certain way to the photo that you just described on the right, of like taking the photo of the ladder. Like here's a photo of the thing that got edited out, And there's in that first chapter where you say in the museums are awfully lonely places to grow up, you also talk about, I think it's in that chapter where you talk about setting off, like testing the explosives in an exhibition. So it's like kind of the background things that are going on, but also the things that aren't necessarily focused on like the masterpiece at the fore, like the actual artwork that's there, but the things that are going on around it. To me, the reason why I want to bring that up is that to me that plays such a strong connection to how I see your project, Special, and how you think about, which we'll get to, I think, in a moment, but how you think about curating, maybe, why you ask people to be a part of what you do at Special, but also how you see artworks functioning beyond something that we're all going towards, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like everything you said is like something that we talked about when we were talking about this talk was the idea of creating something without really understanding where it's going. And that's so much about these experiences, is that it's in the stories that I write about, they're not so much about an outcome, but they're very much living in those moments of trying to figure out where to go. And the book isn't about, there's no climactic arc to this book. It's mostly just trying to find myself as an early 20-something-year-old who just graduated from college and trying to make sense of where I stand in terms of whether it's art making or in terms of where I stand in artistically, because that was something that I kept finding myself back to, and how to move towards it. And I think it was through the process of writing my book, I kind of came to the conclusion that I really wanted to start a space.
Should we jump towards
sure.
that? Or should we,
Like, how does When You Make No Art related to Special? Next question. We'll jump.
Should I go forward?
Yeah.
So this is kind of like, so this was for the couple of years that I was spent writing When You Make No Art. I was also behind the scenes photographing a lot of my father's ignitions projects. So this is his art making process, and this is in the center. That's me with one hand on the camera shutter and the other in my pocket, because it was just what I did.
So this is the period kind of after you graduated or during your school years?
I was photographing during my school years and also in the years after graduating, and even now too, on occasions. And this is the pre-Special, which is my space now. I had an apartment gallery where I did 2 exhibitions, and this was one of the exhibitions. And I called my space If and When, which is also a play on my name. As you probably picked up, I like making puns of my name. And this was an exhibition called Supporting Characters, and they're socks made by Kate Phillips, who's here today too. Who's my classmate from college, and she had made these conjoined socks that everyone fits into, and they could wear, and they can walk around. It's like an experiment in wearing the same socks and what happens. So I wanted this to be, at the time I was starting to think about functionality in artwork and participation, and how we could how anybody entering a space, particularly my house, when I always ask people to take their shoes off, that it's maybe the perfect environment to have a exhibition, have a project where you don't have to take your shoes off for the project, but you're already able to just put on the artwork and then have a group of strangers come together and figure out how to wear this sock together. And then this was an earlier project at Special Special. And the idea of Special Special is a space. This space is in the East Village on 1st Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue. And we have exhibitions with artists and designers, and we also produce art editions with them that are functional. So I want every project that we do to have some kind of functionality, so people with all knowledge and backgrounds of art or lack of it can come in and be able to participate in something we have, whether through the installations or whether through a purchase of an art collectible that is not a ridiculous price.
Should I just go through?
Sure. Yeah. So these are select exhibitions that we've had. This was a Halloween exhibition that we had of Tyvek Halloween costumes. This is a blanket show that we did. So with every exhibition, we also completely transformed the space. For this one in particular, we made it into a homey living room atmosphere of blankets by the artist Una Brigham-Snell. This is a Taokini edition that we had collaborated with the artist Aria McManus, and it's a towel that you can wear. And for the opening of the exhibition, we had a model. First, we had the model go around Soho, and we captured photos of her as people kind of looked at her and wondered what this is. And then we had her during the whole night of the exhibition lying on the floor of our space. This was a hibiscus shirt, a hibiscus installation by Benjamin Langford, and we collaborated with him to create a Hawaiian shirt with the hibiscus flower. This is a show with Sebastian Masuda, and these are all we painted the whole space into pink and covered it with faux fur, and people can come in and take a piece that they liked and use and collect it or use it in a workshop setting that was hosted by the artists in our space to decorate their bags. In the next slide, to decorate their bags or t-shirt, however they liked. And so we kind of started also going in like a workshop format as we started working with artists who had workshop ideas too. So Sebastian Masuda is a well-known artist who popularized Harajuku culture, and so much about that is the freedom of self-expression. So the show invited people to express themselves through these colorful furs. And this is a show by Sarah Verity, which we invite anybody off the street who came by to draw a room that they love or loved in, and it was a show called Love Hotel Rooms. So these are different rooms that all kinds of people contributed to this wall, and it was a growing love hotel. And this show is currently this project is also in our pop-up space in Macau right now. This is a show by Jenny Hada Blumenfield, Illuminations, and it's a play on light. She's a ceramic artist, but through the process of this exhibition, we talked about how she uses primary colors, and I practiced using cyanotypes in college, that I'd recommended this cyanotype photography printing to her, and she started making art from cyanotypes and then started going in a direction of light, a play of light and shadows, which is now like this new direction that she embarked on after our collaboration. And this was a show in October called Chakra, and we transformed our space into these 7 light booths that were in different colors. Each color symbolizes a chakra, and they're sound booths of ambient music recorded from high-end luxury retail stores. So it's a luxury retail therapy without the expensive price tag. You could just come in to align yourself at Special and feel like you went shopping. And this is our current show called Tie Me Up, Lock Me Down. Oh, I misspelled it. Just switch it. It's a jewelry and adornment show by two curators, Bunny Huang and Kristen Lee, who curate and also make jewelry. So it's an exhibition of wearables.
Do you want? What's? I don't know.
Oh, and then this is, so I mentioned earlier that we also recently created a pop-up space, and this was in conjunction, opened at the same time as my photography exhibition in the space of also the MGM Hotel Casino. And the concept of the space is a playground. So we wanted to create an alternative space for people to go and hang out at a casino or hotel if they don't want to go gambling or stay in their room or eat at any of the restaurants. They can come to Special as an alternative playful space. We have these monkey bars like contraptions, and kind of this is like a seesaw we created with one of our fellow artist friends' Oracle deck, the deck of characters. There's like a monkey bar, and there's also a telephone where you speak into one end and your friend can listen to you from the other side of the space. And we made it a very playful shop of to house our editions.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had sort of hinted at it before or said it in some other way, but I'm curious if like within the playground, if there are ways that now you think of what you had written about here, or even in putting together the photos for the other book, if there are different ways that you think of why it is, in some ways, that you ended up so insistent in a certain way on having a space that was dedicated to forms of participatory art, and also editions. Like, what is an edition, and why are people making particular editions for this space?
There was a line that I reread my book this past week, and there was a line in there that I said something along the lines with, I wish museums can be more like a playground.
Right.
Which I didn't remember. And then I thought back to this, and I thought it was so funny that this was always an inherent connection. I think for me, it's because like all of you are here today and experiencing this talk, and I hope that you do find something useful in this conversation. And throughout my journey in exploring art, I felt like the experience is something that people can walk away with a new, refreshed sense. Potentially, like they might have learned something from another person, or they might have came up with an idea that they never thought of before. So it's sort of the serendipity of it, without a purpose or without an ego per se. It's partly also that people are open to anything, and with that openness, there's so many possibilities.
Is that entwined with why you say reluctant artists, the egolessness? Or not?
Well, that's open to interpretation. Because I can't say that there's an ego in every artist. But I can say that a lot of artists tend to have like a vision of what they want to create, and they move towards that vision. And oftentimes we, at Special, we do work with artists with a very specific set of ideas in mind. But I like for there to also be a dialogue that we have, and in the process, perhaps making something unexpected. It could maybe be better sometimes, or it could be unexpected in a way that it can change the course of how they think about their work up until this point. But it's open to all kinds of possibilities.
Should we jump into Tim?
Yeah. So this is Tim making his work for a show at Special last year.
You want me to?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, I'll go very quickly through it. Or these photos. That's in studio. Well, I'll start from what it was. No.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a. Yeah, maybe that's most important. So together with Special, I did a scratch lotto ticket in a way, a scratch game, but on a paper that we had produced together that was just from bleached celery. And I had been bleaching celery for a couple of years before and had ended up sort of without any knowledge of making paper, figuring out that, oh, this actually can make a strange sheet of paper that was incredibly translucent. So that was the sort of project that we worked on together, and the way that as a very big team of the people that work at Special, we all worked on it together. I mean, this is a photo of me in studio, but there's a lot of obviously Wen-You is here taking the photo after we had gone to buy 6 boxes of celery and 30 gallons of bleach or whatever. Yeah, I don't know if what to go directly into besides it's one of the many amazing kind of collaborative projects that seem to have occurred at Special.
What's the title of the show?
The title of the show is Talks to Me, which was the title of the game. Is there a photo of one individual ticket? No, you can kind of see them there.
Like here, Talks to Me.
The game, the way that the game worked is essentially there was a conversation. The sort of fiction of the game is that there's a conversation between people at a dinner table or some kind of table, and you're scratching their speech bubbles. And if the speech bubble happens to make a word, they're all randomized words. So with Wes and Mark and everybody else at Special, we, meticulously but blindly at the same time randomized our stamping of all these different 500 lotto tickets, or scratch game tickets, and then ended up selling them individually, but then also as full sheet editions. And I guess like to pull another thing is that I thought was really wonderful about that process is that there certainly was this moment where we had to juggle, well, what is the legal terrain of making a scratch game, and so actually which was wonderful because it was like the object itself became this sort of binding of trust between us, both in terms of a legal terrain, monetarily, in terms of having to pay back the people that won the game, not necessarily knowing based off of like the ratio of chance. Yeah.
And I've talked to Tim about the project that he did, and I know the process is very intense, and there involves printmaking process, paper making process, and like come up with all the text that printed on a celery paper, and then there's also a hana there,
mana
there, and then with a hair in it. So like, what is that part?
The mana?
Yeah, in relation to the whole installation of the piece, like the special gallery is completely changed in your
in comparison to the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the mana came from many different things, but it's another kind of edible element, or seemingly edible, but also seemingly sort of artificial at the same time. The hair is something that I put in a lot of my work. It's something that, like, as if it got sort of caught into the mix. There's actually a lot of the pieces of paper that have a hair sort of caught in the mix of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think why I mention is because I think overall when we see Wen-Yu's projects, there's often different ways of collaborating with artists. Like the way that when you work with Tim, like the way you think about this is like the amount of like additions that they produce, and it's kind of unique in a way, like in each piece as well. Like all of them are different format, and then but they're additions of the collaborations that they have. So I think that's a very like a kind of different way of when you work with other artists. There might be jackets that you can reproduce, but it's also limited edition in that way.
Well, maybe to that point, and maybe it's what you're getting at with the mana in some ways. What I find so wonderful about the opportunity to work in edition like that is like in some ways it's accessibility. As precious as like to me the paper is, once it's cut and once somebody else has it, like it's up to them to manipulate it in whatever they want. And if it's an edition that's $20, right? It gets treated in a certain way, but still maybe it really depends on the person that has it. But that's what I find so wonderful and kind of both generous, but also generous to the artists that are producing things that you are faced with certain constraint of what the project space is, which is so edition focused.
Yeah, because I think why I mentioned it is also because I don't make a reproducible project as well. So this way, like me and Tim, kind of similar in a way that when we work with special on our project, we have to think about what can be made within the concept of like addition, like accessible to people. So then here, like I'll just continue. I'll jump in.
The next part is all you.
Oh, me. Okay, so this is the show that I did with Wen-You in 2018. It was a project that I did earlier in NARS Foundation, one of the organization in South Brooklyn, and it's a dating project. It's called It Takes 10 years to be on the same boat. So when you came to the dating project, and it was I turned my studio into a dating site and had it set up as a boat, a Chinese river boat, because this sentence, if you take the Chinese translation, it will be 10年修得同船渡. So it's a lot of me thinking about how like how people meeting each other in this like very convenient time of technology, that you kind of have dating apps and emails, and you can connect with each other very quickly. So I had this boat that set up, have a website that people can sign up online, and then they don't know each other, so the only thing that link them together will be time that they pick. So in one way, it's like the fate that they choose to pair them together. And some people drop off right before they come to the meeting, and some people they like change their date. So then the way that they chose to be together is kind of based on what their own choice is. So then when you saw that project, and then she kind of invited me to be part of the SPF show. It's a summer group show. So I produced a pool date.
The theme of SPF was special turning into a pool for the summer, because our logo is a blue oval, so it could be interpreted as a body of water. The idea was that everybody converges at a single body of water. So for that summer, we were taking it literally and calling it a pool, even though there's not actually a pool.
Yeah, and then at that time when I was working with Wen-You, the whole group show is not a traditional sense of a group show. It's kind of like a spontaneous, and there's ways of different artists overlap, but coming in and going out in different times. So I think that was also the first time that I've experiencing in a group show in this way. Do you want to?
You mean that certain works were coming in and out?
Yeah, we start with 3 people in the beginning, and then there's other people coming in, and then there's other art projects end early, and then there's it's a spontaneous group show that's happened, as a SPF show.
Yeah, no, I mean maybe to that point when we had our show up, Talks to Me. I think it was maybe a weekend or week, almost like a week before the show opened, and when you said, "Oh well, we have somebody that's an artist in residence that is, is going to ask you to do if you'd be interested in doing a collaborative project with her," which was Lou, and I mean I think it's a sort of similar energy that there's as if somebody was in house, ready to collaborate with you. It's kind of like okay, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's
that's really interesting. I think I want to also give a little bit content of I think why when you and me start thinking very similar together is when I started doing the dating project. That's when I started an organization called Wildman Club, and it's a lab and club that I try to find the primitive human instinct, and through the form of interactions and communications. I think at that moment I was just thinking a lot about the unthinkable community, how to find alternative ways to communicate. And then communication doesn't equal connection. You have to kind of make an effort and make a exercise together to get to this connection, because pure communication doesn't mean that you're connected. So I think that's
no. I mean it's also. It just reminds me of how I really think of the lotto tickets also, is that making a scratch card that's on a translucent piece of paper, and a very delicate one. And the reason I mention it is because it's similar to what we worked on together, that with something that is a translucent piece of paper, if you print on both sides of it, it's not, they're communicating by negotiating each other. You can only read one if the other side is helping you in some ways to read this side. But it's not like they're actually fused. They're not connected. They're these two sides.
Yeah, I'll jump into the project me and Tim did. This is the performance that we did during Tim's show together, and that's when the Frontiers Conference started entering, because Wildman Club right now is doing a year-long event residency at Special. That's something I think I've never heard about it as well, which when you came up with a plan and then we worked together. So for the Frontiers Conference, I proposed to do a poetry reading and performances at Special within the exhibition artists or with the artists that from outside, and then kind of just figuring out what the communication or connection can be about. So I think during Tim's show we worked together on this piece. It's called Effort in Reading.
Efforts in Reading Caspar by Peter Hunt. Do you want me to talk about it a little bit? Or we'll talk about it together?
Yeah.
So, well, I guess in part, in relation to this idea of collaboration, when around the time that Lou had asked me if we were trying to decide if we were going to do something together during the time of the show, I had been returning to a play that I had sort of stuck in my mind which is Peter Handke's writing of this story of Caspar Hauser, that's this figure that, has been, like, historically the story is that, like, it's a figure that's been locked in some chamber or cave somewhere, maybe by somebody, and only enters to this village not having any language, not having any way of communicating at all with anybody, but having, like, no language at all. And in the larger story, acquires language slowly, but through this teacher, and it has a very sort of upsetting ending to it. But the play Caspar by Peter Handke has these different sort of characters in it. It has Caspar, this figure that kind of comes on stage and doesn't really know what the stage even is, doesn't know how to walk. All of the world around Caspar is kind of undefined because there's no language to define it in a certain way. And then there are these off-stage instructors that are teaching Caspar and giving Caspar language, and there's certain, like, different steps sort of in the play that go through it. And so we decided to work sort of directly, physically with the text of this play, and to find, I mean, it was sort of a simple thing in the beginning, was like trying to find a way of learning to read the text itself. And we did that sort of in several ways. We kind of worked through the text, redacting a lot of parts, and switching off in different roles with Aaron Lehman, who is with us too, different roles of being an instructor, of teaching how to read something. But in our conversations, this also had to do with, like, I think there was a certain point where we were going to translate a part of the text, of coming to some object, which I think is how we sort of both in a certain way think of collaboration, coming to some object, like a piece of paper, from two sides, and not being able to, knowing that communication isn't necessarily the connection between those two, but is the trust in some ways that whatever anybody's doing on the other side, you're sharing this object together. And so, I mean, that's maybe a little theoretical for what is more simply, we were reading, or there were parts in the performance where we were reading the play, and we would dip it into a bowl of water so that we could read the text backwards. And if you've ever read a text backwards that you haven't encountered before, I mean, some people are much better at it than others, but if you voice it, it kind of, you're trying to sound out what seems to be recognizable language or something that, so it sounds like a kind of, and it is like a trying to learn to read, but just trying to learn to read backwards.
Yeah, I think like Tim gave like a little bit background, and then of the performance that we had, it's kind of like helping each other read through this piece of paper. But then to me, I think like this is one example of how Wen-You is allowing us, or allowing the collaborations happening in like a very different way as special.
Yeah, I try to, something about special that I always tell people is that I want to create a platform and give people the opportunity of doing something that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do in another setting, in a conventional art setting, and I want to give that space to people to explore.
Where do you, maybe like to make, where do you feel you are in terms of that? Like when an exhibition is at special?
I think like more and more we've also the space started in 2016 with the idea that we would have exhibitions of art editions that we would produce too with the artist, and more the idea of what an art edition is that's also functional has also very much expanded, with Tim making a scratch lottery ticket on celery paper, and that's kind of like another direction of what it means to be functional. And then in terms of workshops and performance, I wanted to create I started to think in experiential function, in the function of experience, where people come through the space and they experience something, and that's what it is. They function together in a space. And the idea of the Wildman collaboration, we call it the Frontiers Conference, started from this idea that we had during our more of a shop-like rendition called Handle with Care, where we wrapped everything in a gift wrap paper for the holiday season, all of our editions. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to do a masked poetry reading one afternoon. And this was this was Lou's idea, and we kind of just collaborated, and like Wes made these masks, and we just pulled out all of our poetry books and picked a poem to read. And after experiencing this, we had some kind of epiphany where, at least for me, after that, doing that, I felt like there could be a whole series of potential performances that can stem out of I kind of presented it as a conceptual poetic performance. Mm-hmm. And the idea of conceptual poetic performance is that it could be anything. Mm-hmm. So that was when I asked Lou to be our event resident.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just temporarily in special hosting the Frontiers Conference. When I came up with the idea, I was just thinking artists, musicians, poets, they're kind of like scientists that they're trying to explore the emotion and the communication and the connections with each other. So I kind of that fits when you use like this no boundary and endless form of like an art piece. So I think when then there's like this different project that we did in 2019, and then we name it with an order of number. It's a group effort that works on the design of the poster each time, and Wes helping set up, and then communication with the artist. So I often see working with special it's always a teamwork and a group effort. Mm.
And always like also the event residency is also in dialogue with the existing exhibition in this space. So it becomes a collaboration, sometimes static and sometimes not static, depending mm-hmm. on the level of participation by the artist. And so this was during the Love Hotel Rooms project, where we had the people doing the workshop, participating in the workshop to draw a room, and then Lou invited her friends Rob and Wo to do a drag performance in this space where they are two friends coming together
as lovers.
Yeah, as lovers, and then people, and then it was opened up to the audience to talk about. To recall somebody in their life that they had loved but is no longer in their life, and it became a very sentimental, heartwarming evening, and so it was just like very open.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one is me and Tim. How do you feel about this one?
It was also I liked it, and I think part of what was amazing about this one was that it was a complete surprise. I think in the first project there was a script. There was going to be a 20-minute dance performance, and then there was going to be a 40-minute sound recording of people talking about someone they loved that's no longer there, and then we opened it up for anyone to talk about somebody in their life. And then with this one, Tim and Lou just started talking. I set them up, and I was like, I think you guys will be good collaborators.
With you.
And but then they went off and kind of brainstormed what they would do, and I didn't know until the performance. I really didn't know what was going on. But I sort of felt like I trust these two artists to do something that is in the spirit of what I'm hoping for, and that was what I was banking on.
Mm-hmm. it was a really long time reading text. We read many times to add the text down to transform a play into a performance piece. I think that was like it's a two strangers and met together through Wen-You and then start reading this textbook and edit like a month, more than a month, and we just sat down together the whole afternoon, read the textbook together. And then I think the time of being with Tim, working on this piece, like add a lot to, I think, the chemistry for the piece. This one?
I think we have time for one more.
Do you want to just quickly talk?
Okay.
Because it's Lou who brings everybody together.
Okay, so the next one I'll quickly go through. It's a fishing workshop, NYC fishing workshop by the artist Tong Yixing, and he does fishings all around the city. And then he published a book called Fishing in NYC by Gong Price. So we invited him to give a serious fishing workshops, very practical, how and where you can find what type of fish in which season and use which type of tool. So it gave a demonstration about that. So it's also very different than the previous poetry readings. And then the next one was Jenny Blumenfeld. It's a practice of looking at ceramics, or materials in different ways. So we had people behind the mirror and describing the object to the audience, and the audience would draw. So then the most recent one is still happening. It's a live cam karaoke. So we have so Wes worked on this technology part a lot. Like they really he's hiding over there. So he's figured it out how to set up like a live surveillance inside of the exhibition space. So now you see all the special staff sitting in front of the camera. We have Instagram live online and YouTube live online.
And I just want to add that this was our space, as you can see now, up until this point, is actually quite small. And so we can't really fit too many people. And when we have performances, we try to, we want as many people to come, but there is a limit to it. So we started to think about how can we do these performances in a way that's accessible to more people, that more people can tune in from anywhere. And so this is something that we have last month started experimenting with. And then tomorrow, all weekend, we actually have a cam show, and we have different programming. So please tune in this weekend on our Instagram and also YouTube, where you could see a multi-channel of our space. And do you want to talk a little bit? Or, no?
I think we're good now.
Okay.
We'll leave the question to the audience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly thank Printed Matter for hosting us today, and I want to thank Tim and Lou for joining me in the talk and kind of bouncing and being being great collaborators, and also really understanding what I'm trying to do and helping me articulate that. I'm very grateful for that, and thank you all for coming today.
Maybe we have like 10 minutes
questions?
or a few questions, if there are any. Yeah.
How did you name Special?
So special, it's the word doubled. There are many reasons why. One more main reason is because it's we're producing something special, but it's in multiple, it's in addition form. And then also growing up, my mom always thought I was too special. Yes?
I'm wondering how big of an impact this the practice of taking those photos over those years had on your relationship to your family, and how that your role as the documenter and an observer of your family, but also affected your relationship.
I feel like the experience of photography for me is one is like in the present moment where I find something interesting, so I capture it. And then the other is the reflection upon it. So it's being able to capture a moment, compose a moment, and then going back to it. And I think over the years, as I go back to these images, I start to see the images in kind of recollect it for what it was, but also see it from a different light. And so it's upon the review of it over time that I am constantly reorienting myself in these stories and these real life moments that I have. And it's also a personal study of trying to understand where I am in relation to my family. And I feel like it's always changing. So even when I was putting together this book with 175 photographs, as I was trying to curate and figure out what I wanted to include in this book, and editing down the photo, editing from many more photos that I had, that I was also seeing things. A lot of the things in the photographs, for the first time, seeing new things in the photographs again, and it's so much our relationship in our lives where we recall something and it could be different over the years.
Yeah.
Why do you think editions rather than just one photograph or one book, or as with the artist you invite to work that's special?
It goes back into the accessibility of special that I want to instill, is that not one person can collect, but more people can access. And I'm hoping that in writing my book and for more people to read, that they might understand something that I don't understand, and then hopefully reach back to me, and we could have a dialogue about it, and I'll find something new. And also with the book too, like somebody might see something I don't see, and I don't take anything to know. I don't feel like I know everything about what I'm producing, but I want to put something out there for people to come back and start a conversation with me, and that we get to a next level place together.
I want to just quickly make a comment on what Wen-You said, because when I think about community, I often think about when you don't know there's other people have the same opinion as you. You're kind of just in a very small, lonely place, and then hoping other people could understand you. But I think what Wen-You did is she stepped out and start, to make voice of what she think it should be. And then in that way, she start, sending echoes out to the world, and then we all kind of heard and then come along together and become a little group that we understood each other. And then I felt like in some other way that when I met Wen-You, we've never talked about what we like and how we like, and then why we like certain things we like. But through the year of working together, and we realized, a lot of things that we thought is together, because the accessible to a certain object is in some way that comes through why I created Waldman Club. I think that really is something. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So New York has this great tradition of alternative art spaces, Printed Matter is one of them, and definitely in the East Village, a lot of great.
Can't hear you.
A lot of great alternative spaces in the East Village. So I was wondering how you see special fitting into this tradition of alternative art spaces in New York.
Can I try to repeat it? The question is that there are a lot of alternative independent projects, art spaces in New York, also in the Lower East Side, in the East Village. How do you feel that you're contributing in some way to that? We're in Printed Matter, to that, not necessarily, it could be lineage, but also family of independent.
Right. I think a big part of that is that there are a lot of creative types in New York that have, which is why there are all these creative spaces, and so that becomes a large pool of people to work with. And I feel like every day I'm like, have these platforms help people gather together and create these meaningful dialogues. Just like how I've worked on like with a group of people at Special, like it's, and then we're now here at Printed Matter. I feel like that sort of just being around that we're all just working towards understanding one another and finding pockets where we might find common things among one another, or we might express one side of it that's a little different from another side of it, another way of looking at things. So it's just creating different perspectives that I think is very valuable to to the bigger artistic community.
Can I add something to that? Just because I don't know if it really came up so clearly, is that what I find very unique about Special, and to the question about editions, is that when you ask an artist to do an edition, your whole team, I mean everybody at Special is there in their willingness and excitement to make it together. I mean, doing an edition, if you ask me, I'd love to show that work, there's not an in there automatically for us to be collaborating towards something together. But when you are asking somebody, an artist, would you be interested in doing an edition for us, or can we do this as an edition? It's everybody going together towards it, which creates a completely unique set of connections, I think, of the people that work at Special, of the people around. Like beyond the edition being distributed, it's like automatically entwined with everybody that's there. Everybody has different versions of roles that work together at Special, and everybody's more than willing and wanting to have their part in it. I find that incredibly unique. I mean, it's way beyond what somebody could think of as somebody commissioning an artwork from someone. It's someone saying, here's a space that we're going to show something in a way that you think, but also everybody here is not here just to be your PR, right? Everybody here is like here to contribute their way into helping you figure out how we can do this together. I think that's very unique.
Yeah. And to that, thanks to everyone at Special who's here today.
And everyone else. And others. And Rooster and Sheep.
Yeah. And Tiger.
And Tiger and others.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. So there are copies of the two books there.
There's also Tim's book.
There's also, but that's, separate. My book's there, which Printed Matter carries usually, and also a CD that I've done around that book too. So.
And Printed Matter also carries our latest edition of Chinese New Year red pocket envelopes. So if they might be somewhere around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good job.
Yeah, nice.